We'll be breaking down the second round of Elite Prospects Top 64. We'll get into the details of that on today's episode of Locked On NHL Prospects.
You are Locked On NHL Prospects, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hello and welcome back to Locked On NHL Prospects, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. On this podcast, we break down everything prospects related for you 5 days a week, Monday to Friday. I'm Hattie Kalikash, QMJHL and Crossover Scout for Elite Prospects, with Sebastian High, USHL and Crossover Scout for Elite Prospects. And on today's show, we'll be breaking down the rest of the second round there for the Elite Prospects mid-season rankings. We did the top 32 a couple of days ago, looked at the kind of primary prospects we have in the first round. Now it's time for the second rounder, and there's going to be some interesting conversations in that. We'll go through it 12 to 15 picks at a time and work our way down to the honorable mentions and our favorites in that group, including some interesting conversations around guys like Ryabkin and Sascha Boumedienne and those types of guys that we have outside of the first round. Before getting to any of that, though, today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. If you're watching on YouTube, as usual, remember to like and subscribe. Let us know in the comments what you think of the episode. And if you're listening on your favorite podcasting platform, please leave us a rate and review and make sure to make us your first listen of the day. So let's get started right away here with pick number 33 in the second round here for the Elite Prospects rankings. And it is no other than 6'6" Chinese defenseman Haoxi Wang. And he has been phenomenal. In the OJHL with the King Rebellion, and now he's been officially signed to the Oshawa Generals in the OHL. He was basically trying to retain his eligibility to play for Boston University, so he waited until the NCAA ruling on CHL eligibility was announced, and then bang, he gets signed to Oshawa, one of the best teams in the OHL. How has he been so far?
He's been really impressive, and he's still a very raw player. So in terms of the players making the biggest impact at the OHL or CHL level this season, he wouldn't be near like the first round consideration. But the projection is so enticing because, as you mentioned, he is 6'5.5". Probably will get to 6'6" at some point, and he is a wonderful, wonderful skater in all four directions. So fluid in his movements, such a powerful lower body. He explodes from a standstill, which you just don't see from players of this kind of frame, especially among defensemen. So he's a player that even at 215 pounds moves around the ice with a lot of grace. So a player that definitely is catching eyes amongst NHL scouts, and certainly a player to watch for the rest of the season, where I think each game will be quite important in terms of showing what he can do at the OHL level, and try to maybe even work his way into that first round come draft day. But really interesting player. But the next one is kind of on the opposite end of the spectrum, but he's still an elite level skater. So this is a small forward rather than a massive defenseman. And Colin Potter of Arizona State University, he can play down the middle. He can play at left wing as well. 172 pounds at 5'10". He is a really dynamic skater who has some really great on puck skill, but it's more of the off puck habits and their refinement this season that has him climbing up rankings, right?
Yeah, absolutely. He's really refined his two-way game. He's gotten a lot more involved defensively. You still have some concerns with the hockey sense offensively. Like sometimes he'll make some plays that, he won't see the same plays as, let's say, a higher thinker like James Higgins or that type of player in the NCAA level. But he's still got a decent amount of skill. He's really fast. He can overwhelm defenses with his skating. So a real contrast between Colin Potter at 34 and Haoxi Wang at 33 physically. But they're both pretty raw relatively in terms of how high their ceiling can get. So that's why they make the early second round. 35, there's Carter Amico. I think he's the first defenseman out of the NTDP off the board, if I'm not wrong.
Second, Charlie, try the way.
Uh,
My brain was on Bob McKenzie. So.
Okay. At 35, we have Carter Amico, who's the first defenseman out of the NTDP off the board on our rankings. He's a big, very useful defenseman. He's able to make a decent amount of various plays, and he's pretty well-rounded on that side. Some decent offensive upside, really good defensive upside. A lot to like there with Amico. Finally, we got at 36, and this is where Ivan Ryabkin shows up. And if it was for Dylan Griffin, our Russian scout, he would have been much lower on this board. But we had to draw. Yeah, we had to draw a line with Ryabkin. To put it short, he's been very rough to watch this season, right?
He has been. I mean, the defensive implication, the engagement off puck, the cherry picking tendencies have been a very consistent theme all season long, despite his environment being anything but consistent. Whether he's playing in the KHL, the VHL, the MHL, or now in the USHL, that engagement hasn't really shifted on a game to game basis. And while there have still been flashes of playmaking upside, Ryabkin's feet are not the most dynamic in the world, and neither are his hands. So he's a player that has always relied on his intelligence and the playmaking ability to create offensive scoring chances. And that just has been a lot more peripheral and a lot less consistent than it was even in his D-1 season last year, where he was just breaking records in the MHL in terms of scoring. So a player that has a lot of question marks associated to him, still a decent amount of skill in there, but so many doubts, and there's a reason he's plummeting down almost every ranking at the moment, not just ours, but I think that we have soured perhaps a little bit more than just the average scout so far to this point.
Yeah, just more questions and answers with Ryabkin, right? Like it's just really inconsistent with his ability to just create. I mean, he clearly has an NHL level shot. There's flashes of playmaking in Ryabkin's game that just really flash off and make you think like, wow, okay, there's something here. There's a top six potential, but there's just so much inconsistency with the pace. At 37th, we have Cole Rezhny, who's kind of in the same mold. Very inconsistent pace, not a very he's not an advantage creator as much as he could be, and that kind of limits what Rezhny has accessible to him in his game. Plays for the Victoria Royals in the WHL, and he's another player who, if it wasn't for the skill, like Rezhny would be much lower in our boards. But there's some skill there, and you have to respect that. At 38, finally, a prospect we haven't really talked about so much on the podcast, Henry Bruce Davids, a good defenseman. He plays for the London Knights in the OHL, a good program for D-men. Talk me through kind of what makes him here our 38th selection on our board here at Elite Prospects.
Yeah, I mean, he's had a very impressive season so far with the London Knights, and the progression from last year has been really, really big. 6 points in 52 games last season, 26 points in 41 so far this campaign, as a 6'1", 194-pound right shot defenseman who's a very, very solid skater. Younger brother of Hunter Bruce Davids, doesn't have quite the same level of playmaking skill in his game that Hunter did in his draft year, but still a really good puck handler, quite a solid and physical defender. And even when he's attacking, there are definitely some flashes of deception and dynamism. And the activation habits have been quite solid so far this season. So
Yeah.
a player with a lot of really intriguing aspects to his game, and one whose trajectory I think is going in a really positive direction in terms of just how far his game has come in the past 9 to 12 months of his development. But next, talk me through another interesting prospect here with some fantastic offensive tools, but still a lot of question marks as well associated to his game, with Jakob Ihs-Wozniak.
Yeah, so I watched him at the Link and was really not impressed with the pace. He's not a player who's able to modulate his pace really well. I feel like we're talking about the same issues we just did with Rezhny and Ryabkin. Those three are kind of in the same boat. Ihs-Wozniak just, I mean, again, very skillful player, high-end shot, really good playmaking, but just does a lot from a glide, does a lot from a standstill, and it's not working for his game. Then at 40th overall, we have Jakob who's who I remember you telling me gives you kind of Adam Kleber vibes, this massive defenseman, who can skate fairly well as well. Those always have value on draft day. I'm sure he's going to go fairly high. Then Milton Yestreen at 41. He was in the first round on Bob McKenzie's board. You're very effective, energetic, high motor, two-way forward. Can play down the middle, can win face-offs. He's got some skill, but it's really the habits in this game that drive his game. Same goes for Luca Romano, a very detailed center out of the OHL, who's at 42 on our board. And he's been fairly interesting, been showcasing a bit more skill than I expected, but still kind of in the same mold as Milton Yestreen there. At 41 and 42 back to back. But talking to David Bitkowski and Shamar Moses here, the next two off our board at 43 and 44.
Yeah, so Bedkowski is a defenseman from the Owenstown Attack there in the OHL. 6'4.5", 100 to 215 pounds, a really massive frame to work with here. And he's a player that I think has refined his habits quite a bit so far this season. He's not going to light things up massively offensively. He's not the most comfortable activator in the world, but he can play a shutdown physical game quite well. I've only watched a little bit this season, but I've seen some similarities to like the the Jakob style impact as well, in terms of the mobility, physicality combination being quite effective in shepherding play towards the perimeter and clearing the net front as well. But next, Shamar Moses is a 6'1", 200-pound right winger who's been playing excellent hockey with the North Bay Battalion this season in the OHL. He's at a point a game with 34 in 34 games. And he's a guy with a decent enough physical frame. He hasn't really learned to use that to its highest potential just yet. So the physical runway is still quite intriguing here as well, even though his frame is relatively filled out at this point. And there have been quite nice flashes of both handling and playmaking ability so far this season. But to wrap things up, one of my favorite players to watch in the USHL, but I'm going to ask for your input on him this time around. Riker Lee, the 5'11.5", 181-pound right shot right winger from the Madison Capitals, leads all USHL draft eligibles in scoring this season. And the trifecta of goal scoring, playmaking, and handling is off the charts, right?
Yeah, it's just a shame he skates like a 5-year-old. But
Yes.
the skating is brutal. But if you can get him a skating coach, he'll be terrifying. Like, the skill set is off the charts. I've also seen some decent defensive involvement. Like, he gets back, he tries. Like, there's a decent foundation of skills there. It's just that skating is scary. And David saying we, our head scout, says that skating doesn't matter that much when it comes to forwards, but there's a limit to it. I think that it might hold back Riker Lee. But that's our first segment done. We'll get into our second segment here. We'll review kind of the rest of the second round here. We'll get into that in a sec. Let's just take a quick break and hear from our sponsors. If you're looking to buy cheap tickets last minute to any event, Game Time has you covered. Game Time is safe, secure, incredibly easy to use, and they're absolutely obsessed with saving you money. They've got deals at every step of the way to make sure you always get the best price for your tickets. And now with all-in pricing, an option that you can toggle in the app, you can see the price after fees, after taxes, so you know exactly what you're paying for your tickets. And it's not just for sports, comedy, theater, you name it, they've got it. Really, really reliable. You can buy tickets up until the last minute before an event starts, and sometimes even an hour after it starts. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply, but again, it's super simple. You just create an account and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off. So download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. Alrighty, so let's roll right through to the second segment here. We'll kind of review sort of the rest of the second period, barring a couple guys. At 46 overall, we've got an interesting prospect here in Matthew Gard. Big body, plays for the Red Deer Rebels. Pretty aggressive, pretty physical, and has some decent flashes of skill in his game. And the same applies for Jack Nesbitt at 47th overall on our board. Two pretty similar prospects. Nesbitt was in the first round on Bob McKenzie's rankings. We see a bit more limitations regarding the overall skill level and what he's able to do with the puck, and a lot less consistency. I feel like the scouts who like Jack Nesbitt have caught the good games. The guys who don't just have caught the wrong ones. He's very, like, game to game, you don't know what to expect from Nesbitt. Then Will Horcoff at 48th, a prospect you talked to me about very early in the scouting year, and has moved over to University of Michigan and did fairly well for himself, right?
Yeah, again, shockingly, putting distance between oneself and the NTDP this season can only be a good thing for one's development.
Yeah.
But he's been really, very solid with Michigan so far. He's been playing bottom 6 minutes since transferring to the NCAA. And he's been a really intelligent, connective kind of player, very much playing a support role. He's another big forward, standing at 6'4" and 3/4, as well as 190 pounds. So he's another massive frame, but it always has been the intelligence that's been the most attractive part of his game to me personally, in terms of projecting him to the NHL. He plays at pace, really it's quite soft hands, not the kind of hands that are going to dissect an entire defensive structure and create a high danger scoring chance all on its own. But in terms of small area give and goes, connective plays, getting around a single forechecker, solving problems as they come up, I think that he's a quite adaptable puck handler. And the playmaking is still a work in progress, but the vision and the intelligence supporting the passing game, I think, bode well in that as well. But next we have Sascha Boumedienne here in the NCAA, who is a 6'1", 190 pound left shot defenseman. And this is a player with some very distinct abilities, right? In terms of a very clear weakness with his skating ability, but very clear strengths as well with the
Yeah.
breakout passing and just the overall processing and vision of the game, right?
Yeah, I think the next four in that group as well, like Boumedienne, Skvortsov, Sascha Boumedienne, Daniil Skvortsov, Sascha Boumedienne, Daniil Skvortsov, Peyton Kettles, and Dakota Rio Mullen, all four of these guys from 49 to 52 on our board, are kind of in the same boat of having very clear strengths, but very obvious weaknesses as well. With Boumedienne, the skating's awful. I think we could get that off the page, but he's a fantastic passer out of his zone. He's really, really good at finding breakout options. Daniil Skvortsov, I think his main issue is consistency. He's an average skater, average skill level across the board, pretty physical. But there's just a level of consistency. Like sometimes he'll give you fantastic breakout kind of flashes where he just spins off a check, makes a pass off the boards, joins the rush. And other times he's just kind of static in his own zone. Peyton Kettles as well, decent skater, not as good of a thinker of the game. The same applies for Dakota Rio Mullen. Very, very, very good skater, but the hockey sense just isn't up to par, which is why these guys are in this kind of glut, because they have strengths they can build off of, but they have things they need to work on. At 53, Hayden Palpanekis. Haven't watched a ton of this kid. He just got traded to the Kelowna Rockets in the Andrew Crystal trade. I'll definitely be getting some looks on him as well. And then another goalie off the board, which isn't Jack Ivankovic. Pyotr Andreyanov was the next guy off the board on our goalie scout, Sean Shapiro's board. Plays for Moscow in the MHL. Decent size, but again, a prospect we haven't really watched that much on our side here. Then Lirim Amidovsky from the North Bay Battalion in the OHL. Do you have any viewings on this kid at all, or is this in the guy we should skip past as well?
Just passing viewings where I like the motor quite a bit, good amount of energy. He's playing on the wing in the viewing I caught, but it wasn't enough to give a full blown scouting report on. So I would advise people that are curious about Amidovsky, go check out his Elite Prospects profile and the scouting reports that are linked below there.
100%. Bruno Osmanis at 56. Finally, a guy we can talk about. He played for Latvia at the World Juniors and was fantastic for them, especially against Team Canada. He plays for Björklöven in the J20. So on the Swedish side of hockey, and our Finnish scout Lassi Alinen and our chief European scout is a big fan of him and thinks he's one of the most skilled guys in European hockey. So I'll defer to him on that, but I've also seen him high-end motor, high-end drive to win games over with the Latvian team at the World Juniors. So he impressed me a ton. Ethan Zada is another guy here at 57th that we have that is pretty good. I think more on the soft skill side than the hard skill side, but that's just in passing viewings on my end. Another guy I need to watch a ton of to get a better grasp on. He plays for the Niagara Ice Dogs in the OHL, a team that I don't get the chance to watch all that much. So as the season goes on and they get more comfortable with the Q guys, I think both of us will start branching out and start watching more of these mid-second rounders. But I think that Dylan Griffin, our Russian scout, gave a raving report on Alexander Zharovsky of Ufa in the MHL. Can you talk me through kind of what the gist of what Dylan likes from this prospect is?
Yeah, Jurovsky's been excellent so far this season. I mean, he's a 6'1", 163-pound left shot winger playing in the MHL with Tolpar Ufa. And this is a player with a lot of dynamic skill in his game, and the flashes have been very bright. He's been playing in the MHL this year, so of course the quality of competition hasn't been the absolute highest in the world. But just as a little insight, he's scored in his last 4 consecutive games, and in those games he's scored 6 goals and 8 points. He is loving his life at the moment there in Russia, just creating off the rush and playing with a lot of playmaking ability as well. But moving onwards, we have here a couple of my USHLers. We actually have 4 consecutive ones here. Starting off at number 59 with Cole McKinney. Physically mature, two-way center, very meat and potato style of play, but I think he'll be an NHLer in a bottom 6 capacity. William Bell has some really good power elements as a 6'3", 220-pound right winger. He's here at number 60, and I really like his effort level and the defensive impact. Charlie Treadaway is a very interesting name that has actually gone up on my board. I think he actually fell in our rankings here, but personally, he's been climbing a little bit. There's been a little bit more thought behind his decisions, a little bit less panic, and more defaulting to the simple available play rather than searching incessantly for a long stretch pass and ending up just getting the puck as far away from pressure as possible, typically leading to turnovers. And I had him above Maceo Phillips, who is here at 62, the next player. So back-to-back NTDP defenseman. It really is like pick your choice between the two. Treadaway, I think, better skating for sure, better combination and layering of mobility and physicality. But Phillips has that hulking frame at almost 6'6", 228 pounds. If you want to get your shutdown like number 5 defenseman long term, you could probably mold him into that kind of guy. And now to finish off the top 64, and in the next segment we'll do the honorable mentions. We have a former USHLer in Zachary Morin at 63, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Zachary Morin has been very interesting so far this year. I think he cares maybe 10% more than he did in the USHL, which I mean looked like zero at times, but now there's a bit more give a damn in his game, and you can really see it when he's on the ice. He's willing to push inside contact. He's willing to get inside opponents' hands, drive the middle, and kind of make plays from there. Give and go, shots in transition, all that good stuff. He's a really skillful player, but lacks a bit of detail and lacks a bit of pace. Once he develops that, though, he'll be really interesting. I think he could rocket up the boards if teams are confident with his ability to develop that pace, to develop that maturity a bit more. He'll be fantastic. But lastly, talk with your Tyler Hopkins, another player I haven't really watched that much this year. What's your take on him so far?
Yeah, he's been interesting so far this season. He's been going at about 0.75 points a game so far this season, playing some really solid middle 6 minutes for the Frontenacs. And he plays with pace, has some really good physical tools as well in terms of the intensity, the leverage mechanics, getting involved and keeping his feet moving in board battles. And his off-puck offense is also one that is full of quick movement, finding pockets of space, taking some clever routes, riding blind spots of defenders, and really finding little spots and bits and pieces between coverage to get into goal scoring positions. But that wraps up this second segment. In the next one, we're going to dive into the honorable mentions because there's some very fun players in here that we still have some doubts about in terms of projectability, but are very, very fun to talk about and to watch. But first, a quick message from our sponsors. From the first whistle to the final drive, FanDuel makes the NFL playoffs even more exciting. Right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $300 in bonus bets. If you win your first bet, that's $300 to keep the action going. The FanDuel app is easy to navigate, and the variety of bets keeps every single game exciting. Plus, when you win, you get paid instantly. No waiting around for your winnings. Whether you're betting on your favorite team or just looking for some extra excitement to the playoffs, FanDuel has got you covered. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today and get started with $300 in bonus bets. That's FanDuel.com. Make this playoff season unforgettable with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL.
Alrighty, so let's close things off here with our final segment. We'll talk about the honorable mentions of the guys we like from this list that didn't really make it, and why exactly. Because there's some interesting guys in here that people think, well, this guy needs to be in the top 64 at least, but we have a different opinion at Elite Prospects, whether it's Mitch or David or I or Sebastian or whoever else, Cam. Lots of doubts around certain prospects that the public sphere is really high on. Let's start with Adam Benák, who's been all over the place on rankings. He's 39th on Bob's, and the public really likes him because he plays so well at international tournaments. But at the USHL level, there's been a considerable lack of. Well, talk us through it. What's been missing in Benak's game so far?
Incisive middle drive. That's been the biggest concern for me personally, because there's so many elements that I want to fall in love with. This is a very intense, high effort, high motor kind of player. Flashes of high end playmaking, even in his 5'7", 160-pound frame. He's a really solid defensive player, both in his habits and his engagement. Really good puck handler in tight, can solve complex situations, plays with pace and dynamism, but it is restricted to the perimeter, and that gives us a lot of doubt, because even though he is intense and quite physically capable, especially for his size, struggling to access the middle of the ice is something that will shut off very, very, very many scoring opportunities at the next level, and the chances of making it as an undersized player, especially as a forward and a spark plug at that, is so
Yeah.
dependent in the NHL at playing in the middle. Whether you're looking at guys like Brendan Gallagher, Logan Stanko, and even Matvei Michkov, these are all players very comfortable right around the net in the danger areas, and that hasn't been the case for Benák this season. Been a bit of a different story for LJ Mooney. Missed a lot of this season to injury. Another 5'7" USHL forward here. He's probably the most intense player in the entire draft class. The last viewing I logged of him was probably the highest motor viewing I've logged of any prospect in the last 3 years. He is the dog out there on the ice. There are no other dogs when he's on the ice. There's only him, and he's a very pacey kind of creator. He applies a ton of defensive pressure. He can miss some reads. He can overdo it on back checks at times because he is so intense. And he's not the most mechanically gifted skater in the world, but that intensity and stride rate make up for that in terms of the movement. But the question here, again, lack of dynamism. There's flashes of dynamic skill for sure, but he struggles to take over shifts. And when you're 5'7", you have to be spectacular, and we haven't quite seen that this year. But again, injuries are in there, and both him and Benák are players that I'm personally cheering for, even though there are still projectability concerns.
Yeah, same here. I like these two, but there's just not enough to make them top 64 picks, especially not by NHL standards. If we don't like them at AP and they're small, they're too small for the NHL. So that's for those two. I also want to talk about Jakob who shows up in our HMs as the third goalie ranked. Listen, he's 5'11". I think NHL teams are not going to like him. He's ranked below like Lucas Beckman from the QMJHL, and like QMJHL goalies are usually very hard to develop into NHLers because of the different style there. So the fact that he's ranked below like two QMJHL goalies, it's not a good sign. But listen, when he's on, like he's a goalie who needs a lot of shots to be effective. Like once he gets momentum, you're not getting pucks past him. But in 20 to 30 shot games, he's pretty easy to beat actually. So that's been an issue with him this year. Another prospect was pretty interesting. Well, another tendency I'd say that's very interesting. We have one Swede in our honorable mentions, Viggo Nordlund. All the rest, Eric Nilsson and Eddie Genborg and Theo Stockselius and those types of guys did not make the cut. I think that our Swedish scout Jimmy Hamrin isn't the biggest fan. Nordlund's really interesting as a high-end playmaker. I really liked what I saw from him at the Hlinka. Very interesting prospect on that side. And finally, I want to talk about the three QMJHL guys that I forced onto this board. Mathieu Nobert, Nathan Quinn, and Noah Laberge. We'll start with Nobert. Phenomenal playmaker. Plays in the top six alongside or sometimes even above Justin Carbonneau in the pecking order in Blainville. Really, really interesting playmaker, really interesting physical tools as well. He's listed at, I think, 168 or 166 pounds or something like that. That's a lie. Like he's able to push guys around and his mechanics are really good. He's a limited skater, not the highest end kind of shooter. I think he scores a lot through positioning, but his vision's really, really good. So I think he deserves that. Nathan Quinn, he's got that dog in him. He'll force plays on the forecheck. Really, really, really good defensive player. And he's got a decent foundation of kind of skating, shooting and passing. His handling is a concern. His skate is a concern. That holds him back, but he's pretty interesting prospects as well. So that's for Nobert and Quinn. We'll get to Noah Laberge, who took some time for me to warm up on. But now I love him. Like he's a fantastic rush defender. He's able to stifle plays really well. Really good at layering stick and body, baiting space with his puck, with a stick, just kind of getting stick out of the way, making a forward think that he's got the space to move through, and just fast like closes that space. So that's an interesting skill set. Good on retrievals, good scanners, a good scanner, and he loves to push up the ice. He activates really, really hard, and all that blends so well together because he's such a good skater. I think he's got a chance to make our top 64 next board. I think that he's got that shot if he continues to show what he's shown on a team that's not that good in Acadie Bathurst. Like he doesn't have a lot of support on that team, and he's doing really, really well. But that's our episode done. Thank you very much for tuning in. If you're watching on YouTube, remember to like and subscribe. Let us know in the comments what you think of the episode. And if you're listening on your favorite podcasting platform, please leave us a rate and review and make sure to make us your first listen of the day. For a second listen of the day, remember to check out Locked On Sports Today. They've got all your news and updates about what's going around sports. And make sure to check out Locked On Fantasy Hockey. Steal and Flip have the best advice for you regarding fantasy hockey. Make sure to check them out. This has been Hattie Kalakash with Sebastian High. Thanks for tuning in, and we hope you tune in next time.